Hi everyone, my name is Caleb. I'm one of the recording students here at YST Conservatory of Music. And welcome to the studio. Today we're really honored to have Sully over here with us to give us a masterclass on Waves plugins in the context of live sound. Right, so hey Sean.
Hello.
Great to have you here.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, how's Singapore been so far?
Warm. Very warm and humid, lots of humidity.
Yeah.
Where I live in California is dry, very deserty dry.
Yeah, I've been there before. It's really nice.
Yeah, I mean this is nice. It's nothing wrong with it. It's just hotter and wetter than we're used to.
Yeah,
it's good though.
Yeah,
had a good time here.
Cool. How's the F1 shows and all
yeah,
that?
It was fun. You know, those shows are always a challenge because the main event is the race. You know,
yeah.
We're just some secondary thing, but you know, it's still important that the concert goes well. And but it was fun. We had a good time. You know, all the. You just got to deal with logistics of the race and the track, but we had a good time. It was fun.
Yeah, nice. It's great to hear. So could you just tell us a little bit more about yourself? Maybe what you do?
Live sound engineer. I've been doing this just under 30 years now. Work for mostly large international touring acts, doing, you know, F1 races and large arena and stadium tours all over the world. Pretty much all I've done my whole life is mix music and recording studios and live, but mostly in the last 15, 20 years been live sound. The recording studio business has kind of tapered off a lot in America especially, and the live sound is just, taken off like a rocket. So just kind of morphed from the studio stuff, which I did quite a bit of, into doing live sound, and it's worked out pretty good. Cool.
So maybe you could tell us a little bit about how did it all begin for you?
I started really young. I'm a third of four boys. My father was a rock and roller and listened to rock and roll music as kids, and so music was very prevalent in our household. And my older brothers were musicians. When I was 7, 8, 9, 10 years old, I had brothers that were 11, 12, 13, 14 and started playing in bands, and I was just around music a lot. And just had fun. It was a fun thing to do, to hang out with the band and be around music. And my father was a fireman, who we all thought we were going to be firemen. All my brothers were like, a long line of Irish firemen. My uncles and grandfathers, everybody was firemen. And my dad, who loved his job but hated what he did for a living because it was tough work, saving lives and putting out fires. And he also had to be a paramedic to be a fireman. And so my dad was very vocal about, like, do what you love, like get a job that's fun and enjoyable, and it's not like going to work, it's just something that you have fun doing. If you're an artist and you paint for a living, like what better than that, And so my dad was very vocal about it, and at a young age I saw bands making money and I saw sound guys making money, and I just kind of figured this is what I love doing, and since my dad's telling me to do something that's fun, let me figure this out. And at a very young age, I just took it really serious and studied on my own and got the experience because I had brothers that played, that were in bands and that were working shows, and every night I'd see the four musicians split up $100, but the sound guy would leave with $100. I was like, that guy's making as much money as four of them are splitting. And so it really like kind of hit home for me, like that's a job that, especially at this tiny little local level, is pays well. Can only imagine it. And I didn't even know what it could become where I'm at now. Like then, I was just a kid and had no clue that it would become what it is, but I saw the potential and I knew that I liked doing, whether I knew I was going to be a sound guy, and I just liked being around music, and it, because I played a little bit of everything but not very good at everything, I was never in the band. I was always just stuck setting up the gear and putting the speakers up and making the guitar players' rigs sound good by turning knobs, and it just steamrolled out of control. By the time I was in high school, I was working for an oldies band that did 50s and 60s doo-wop around 3 states where I grew up, and they were working 4 or 5 nights a week in the summertime and paying me cash, and I was making good money in high school doing that, and it just steamrolled out of control. Next thing I know, I was working for a local sound company that did international tours, a big company called 8 Day Sound that was based in Cleveland, Ohio. And I basically blagged my way in there. I was like, "Oh, can I get a job for you guys?" And they were like, "No, we don't hire kids." And I begged them to give me a job, and they finally interviewed me. And in the interview process, the guy blew me off, and he was just like, "Yeah, we need truck drivers, not sound guys." And I'm like, "I don't drive truck." But the weekend before that interview, the oldies band I was working for did a show with Chubby Checker. You know who Chubby Checker is? An old 50s and 60s kind of doo-wop thing. And his sound guy didn't show up. And I got lucky that their production manager asked me to mix Chubby Checker. And all the 8 Day sound guys that were there remembered me because of that. And so when I went for the interview, they all remembered me and they all said hi to me. And the guy who interviewed me was like, "You guys know this kid?" Like after I left, they were like, "Yeah, he's, he knows what he's doing." And he called me right back and he was like, "Can you work this weekend?" And next thing you know, I was working for a sound company, flying PA and miking stages on Frank Sinatra was my first tour.
Ooh.
I was out miking orchestras and flying the speaker system. And I just took it so serious. And anytime anybody needed a sound engineer, I'd be the first to put my hand up. Instead of being the first to ask how much it paid, I was the first to say, "I'll do it." And it just, next thing you know, people were asking for your phone number. Can I get your number? Will you come work for us? And here I am 30 years later mixing some of the biggest rock and roll and pop bands in the game.
Yeah. It's been quite a ride.
Yeah, absolutely.
I suppose.
Absolutely. Like I said, I never expected it to ever be, anything, let alone what is a career. This is all I've done. I took it serious enough, and I started young, and I've done nothing but this my whole life. I might have had a job at a 13-year-old delivering newspapers, or something, but for the most part, I've done nothing but audio my whole life, and it's just, it's been great. Can't complain.
Yeah. I guess it's every sound man's dream.
Yeah. Yeah. I know every day someone asks me, "How do I do this? How do I get to where you've got?" And all I can tell them is my path, which was, I started young enough, and I feel like the opportunities that I had came because I took it so serious, so young, and I forced my way into the business by begging this sound company to hire me. And would they have hired me had that Chubby Checker thing not happened, the gig that weekend? Probably not. But since I did a good job that weekend, so all I can really ever tell anybody is just desire this more than anything, and you could get good at it. And even if you're older and you're starting in your 20s or your late 20s or something, you could still get good at it to get into it. Of course everybody's like, "Well, how do I do that?" You got to be around it. I was around bands, I was at clubs doing shows, and got the experience doing that. So just immerse yourself in it. Everybody always wants to know, like, what does that mean? Like, go back at church. Churches always have sound equipment, and they always have performers and stuff. So you have to be around it, and you have to gain the knowledge of what things should sound like acoustically before you can make things sound good electronically with this stuff. And you just gotta immerse yourself in it, take it serious, and next thing you know, you'll be doing it.
Yeah.
Whether you get paid or not, that's a different story, but that'll come. That happens eventually. So.
Yeah. So it seems like a lot of your story is really about just showing up and really just being there. And all of that.
If you take it serious enough, like I did, if you show up and you don't know what you're doing, then people are just going to get out of the way. Yeah. But if you show up and you have an attitude like, "I know what I'm doing," and if you know more than everybody else there, then of course you're going to get the job. Someone's going to go, "Please help. You obviously get this, so please help." And so don't just show up, without a clue, because that will get you nowhere. And everybody's like, "Where'd you go to school to learn how to do this?" Well, 30 years ago, there weren't a lot of options for school. There weren't many places you can go. And my father, since he was, a very smart, mechanically was smart, and he was self-taught, and he was a fireman. He could tie 150 knots, and he read books on his own how to do it. And he was like, just figure it out, buy the books, and learn. And when you go to a job and something happens and feedback occurs and you're like, "How did that happen?" Come home and read the book on the chapter on feedback and what causes feedback, And I taught myself young, and I took it so serious that it was like, this is what I want to do. And so I pushed and pushed, Nowadays, you see everybody walks around with their phones looking at Instagram. Like, we didn't have those distractions when I was a kid. So it was a lot easier. So put the distractions down and focus, and you can get good at anything, know? If you can read and write, you can pretty much get good at anything. And this job doing sound is people look at it like it's some really advanced, like, magic trickery, but it's not. It's like, it's like anything, you can learn to do it and get good at it. You just got to be serious enough to take the time and quit staring at your phone and and work towards that goal, and you'll get it.
Yeah. So I guess now we're gonna go into some of the questions that have been sent
over
to us. First one, coming in fresh for a show, right? Is day one, maybe is bumping day, and maybe the band's coming in maybe the next day or something, or even during sound check. What's your general approach to mixing a band?
Well, for us, you have to remember that at the level we're doing things at, it's almost never just like a one day and get it ready and then do the show the next day. We're almost always long in advance talking about the input list, talking about the stage plot, how things are laid out, and figuring out how we're going to do it before we even attempt to think about like where we go from there. But then we spend weeks in rehearsal, with the band playing, and put a microphone where you think it should go and listen, and if it doesn't work, you move it, and we spend a lot more time getting it really dialed, like you would in a recording studio. You would never just jam microphones and everything and just go record and start mixing. It takes, to get this truly good, because live sound is so different than recordings. Recordings, this place probably sounds amazing. That tracking room probably sounds amazing. Where we do this job, that almost never occurs. We're playing in obnoxious arenas or stadiums with lots of reflections, and so you have to take the time to get everything as good as you can coming to you, meaning don't just jam the kick drum mic in the hole and go, that's it. Take the time to move it back and forth. And so we spent a lot of time preparing for that stuff, like you would in a recording studio. And I know live sound, you lose, if you're not at the level that I'm doing at, a lot of times you do just get thrown into a room and mic up a band and go, but don't ever be afraid to take the time to go, the kick drum doesn't sound, swap the mic out. Try, sure, I thought this mic would work, but it doesn't. Or, where it's at in the hole doesn't sound, you got to take that time and be assertive about where things go and how they work, because the results will be better because of it, So it's a lot of little tiny, steps that make the thing become what it is, and it's never super fast. We get asked and to do it that way a lot. And of course, being in the business 30 years now, the experience I have, I there's not a lot of guessing anymore. But when you're not experienced and you're guessing, you have to experiment and you have to move things around and take the time. So it's a lot about just messing with things and listening and don't worry about the plugins, which is what we're here for today. Don't worry about all that stuff, because that if you start with garbage, then there is no de-garbage plugin. You know what I mean? So you have to start with good sources, and things that sound good in the first place. And a lot of that's just experimenting, and figuring it out.
Yeah, I've heard a quote from somewhere before. He says that if you get a turd, the best you can make it is a polished turd.
It's not easy to polish turds. You ever try? You just mash it around,
Yeah. All right. Next question that we've got. So when you're mixing on site, right? Do you have any sort of reference sound or reference material that you use?
No, I stopped using pre-recorded music a long time ago, only because that stuff is so perfect and so polished and so overproduced. I mean, you put it up in a speaker system, there's almost no way it can't sound good. If the rig works and the system's been deployed appropriately, it's too easy. It's like having really good monitors. It's kind of why NS10s are still popular, because they don't really help you make things sound good. You're forced to tweak and turn to get things to sound the way you want. And so I typically, because of these console stuff now all have virtual sound check, I just use the show that I'm mixing. Like yesterday we got ready for the F1 race. I put up a Chili Pepper show from a couple weeks ago. We were in Abu Dhabi, and it was a similar environment, outdoors kind of thing, and I just used that, and before I even start with that though, I use an application called Smart V8, which is a system analysis. It's basically a transfer function tool where it measures the output of the desk and compares it to what comes out of the PA and hits a microphone. And I start with pink noise, to get the rig and all the different sources time aligned correctly, and any peaks or valleys in the response of pink noise, which is just flat. Pink noise is just a random noise of all frequencies equal. And so the whole idea behind that is just to get everything doing everything evenly, basically. Not flat necessarily, because flat, you know, if you listen to reference monitors, they're never flat. Now, in this environment, they're never flat. If you put them in a anechoic chamber where they're designed and stuff like that, they might have a very flat response. But once you get reflections involved in the room and the transfer, because all these spaces add low frequency and, you know, standing waves and all these things. So once you get that figured out, like what the room adds to the source, because we're comparing it to the direct output, we know exactly what that looks like, and then we see what the PA and the room do to it. We make adjustments for that, and then I listen to the tracks from, you know, the last show that's similar to the environment, and walk around and go sit in other seats and go up front and make sure that, you know, the subwoofers aren't too loud. And you know, it's kind of silly to use pre-recorded music because the stuff sounds so good, you know, and it's irrelevant to the show you're doing, you know. Even if you use, you know, I'm currently mixing the Chili Peppers, even if I put a Chili Peppers record in, the instruments on stage are different than what that record was made with, the microphones, the space that it was recorded in, none of that stuff's relevant to what we're doing. So what's the point? You know, it's kind of a, you know, a lot of times you put that stuff up and you're like, wow, listen to this, it's great. But then you put the microphones up that are on stage and you put those on and you're like, not so good. You know, so it's better to start with the unpolished, amazing things. And that way it helps you, you know, forces you to go, I need to do this or that or, you know, whatever to get it better. And so I just stay away from the pre-recorded music. You know, everybody I know that listens to like that kind of stuff, I think they're wasting their time. We don't get a lot of time to do it. So I use basically what is very pertinent to what we're doing, which is the irrelevant stuff, mics and inputs, and from a similar scenario.
Cool. So the next question, what do you think schools can do to gear students up for a career in live sound?
Force them to put their ears in the environment that gets you familiar with how things sound. You know, a couple of us were talking about this on the way over here today. You know, the school or me or any of us can teach somebody like how to turn the knobs to make a drum sound the way we think it should sound, but that's because we have an idea in our head of what it should sound like. So if you're a young student and you've never stood next to a snare drum, then how do you know what a snare drum sounds like? What's the audio representation in your head of a snare drum? If it's nothing, then what good do the knobs do? What good do plugins or processing do? You have to know, you have to have a very good audio memory of what things should sound like. So being around music, you know, like for me, being around bands at a young age and having drum kit in the house and having guitars around, that was a very good primer for getting into sound, because I had a very well burnt in knowledge of what those things sound like acoustically, being next to them. You know, we were talking this on the way over, you know, when you stand close to a snare drum and somebody hits it really hard with a rim shot, it almost makes you blink. You know what I mean? It's so powerful and so impactful. Like, until you really have that burnt into your head, how can you ever achieve that with turning the knobs? You know what I mean? You have to know what that is. And so the best thing a school could do would be to force kids to be around those instruments. You know what I mean? Like, playing with pre-recorded music, listening to amazing reference monitors is not really gonna. Sure, you can teach the concepts and you know, the skill set of like what a compressor does, and teach, you know, how gates work, and that all is necessary. But until people truly have the visual, the audio memory of what things sound like, you'll never get good at this. You know, you have to really have that burnt into your brain of like what things sound like. And you know, our audio memory is very short. Like if we were comparing two speaker systems and I went like this with an AB switch, you'd be able to tell the difference, that one's brighter or that one's darker. But if I played this one and then we sat for 2 minutes and talked about something else and then played that one, go, okay, now what was the difference? It'd be really hard for you to go, this one was that, or you know, you might have a very broad answer, but your detailed answer would only come from really quickly auditioning things. So because our audio memory is short, it's nothing like our visual memory. You know what I mean? You see a picture of your grandma when you're a kid and you can remember her forever, you know? But if you heard her voice once and never heard it again, you might not remember what her voice sounded like when you're 50, you know, because our audio memory is short. You know, I can't tell you why that is. That's the way our bodies work. But that's why you have to really, really get into listening to things over and over and over again. You know, the more you hear a drum kit live and acoustically, the better you'll retain how it should sound, you know, and when you get standing in front of this, it gives you a better idea of where you're going. And so I think that, you know, it would be the best thing to do, would be to be around the instruments more. Spend a lot of time next to a drum kit.
Next to a drum kit.
Having it hurt when, you know, because they you know, some drummers are very powerful and drums are very powerful, and so it's something you have to have a lot of time with to remember it. So that'd be a good way to start.
Yeah, I agree. I think listening to instruments and getting all of that in your heads.
Absolutely.
You gotta
very
know
hard
that.
to do.
Yeah. All right. So next question is gonna be: would you say that a strong studio background is necessary to be a top live sound engineer? And I guess in a similar vein, how difficult would it be for people with a recording studio background to make the transition?
Is it necessary? No, not at all. Because you can learn, you know, nowadays, think about studios like you get Open Reaper or any one of those, you know, DAWs you can download and have on your laptop. And so that's a studio, right? So being in this environment is not necessary to learn. And this is way easier than live sound because the environment is very acoustically treated. You know, the room sound, the drum sound. We put drums in these great sounding spaces, and like all that stuff is like, it's cheating when it comes to live sound because none of that happens or exists in a live sound. The rooms sound like crap. The microphones aren't high end, you know, FET 47s and like the greatest stuff. You know, we use mics that don't feed back instead of mics that sound good in live sound. And so, you know, there's a side to live sound that is completely irrelevant from recording studios that I think guys that come from, I know a lot of live engineers that are studio guys that have no clue about what acoustics of rooms do and how PAs are tuned, and they don't get the greatest results because of it. You know, sure, you're a great engineer, but you know, there's a way bigger side of live sound to being good at it than just being a good mixer. You know, a friend of mine, Robert Scoville, I'm sure you know who Robert Scoville is. He posted a question the other day online, like, you know, which would you rather hear, a great mix through a badly tuned PA or a poor mix through a greatly tuned PA? You know, which would be your preference? You know, and everybody's answers were kind of like all over the place. You know, but if you think about it, like, if you have a great mix but the room sounds like crap and the PA's not set up right, it's still a great mix coming through this horribly sounding system, you know? But if you have a mediocre mix but the room is amazing and the PA's tuned right, it's probably a little bit better represented because it, you know, it works in the environment that you're in. So I wouldn't say that a studio background is necessary. It won't hurt, of course, you know. There's lots of knowledge to be gained in working in a studio and learning about compression techniques and how compressors work and how we use them to create and add character and vibe, you know, because compressors aren't really just about, you know, making things level, you know. There are a lot of them are about, you know, adding character to things. And so, of course, there's that. You know, studios, you can study in a studio. Where live sound, you're just thrown into the fire and you got to go. And there's not a lot of like studying. It's just get it together and make sure it doesn't feedback and go. So the studio is definitely you know, advantageous to have, but it's not necessary at all because you can learn that stuff and you can sit with your laptop and you know, there's lots of online courses and stuff you can take to learn and read about, and so not necessary, but wouldn't hurt. Doesn't hurt to have.
So how, maybe we've covered it, could you just talk a little bit about how do we make that transition? If you're a studio guy and you want to start going to live sound?
You know, the easy way would be to have a band that loved what you did in the studio and go, will you come do our tour, you know, come do our live sound, and then that's, you know, you're cherry picked into that situation, and that's great. But that doesn't happen very often, you know. So the best way would be to get the experience, find the, you know, if you have local clubs that have music every night, don't just go there and buy a beer and sit at the bar. Go there and hang out with the front of house guy or the monitor guy and bug them. You ever need help? Are you guys ever short-handed? Can I get in here? And can I, you know, don't go in there going, how much money will you pay me to help? Just go in there and go, do you need, are you know, I see you sweating, you know, you need help? I'll help you mic this drum kit. And you'd be surprised how many guys would go, sure, get up here and plug those wedges in and, you know, and do those kind of things. And it never hurts to be pushy and to like beg people for things, you know. Most people will never go, hey, is anybody here that knows how this stuff works? I need help. No one will never say that because they're busy and they're just focused and they're going. But if you get in their face and say, hey, I have a little bit of an idea of how this stuff goes. You look like you're sweating it out. Like, you want to help? And just do it, you know? Even if you do 10 minutes worth of work, there's no reason to ask to get paid for that anyways, you know? You just help the guy mic a drum kit or whatever. And next thing you know, he's talking to his other buddy that works there later going, man, that kid was just jumped in there and got in there and helped, you know? Like, oh, did you get his number? You know, that's how that kind of goes. And so it doesn't hurt to be pushy or find local churches that have, because churches are always looking for volunteers, you know, to help. And you don't even have to be religious to help at a church, you know what I mean? Like, I know a lot of people probably go, oh, well, I don't go to church, so what am I going to go work there for? But if you need the knowledge and you need the experience to get into this position and have these, you know, environments that help, those are it. Clubs, churches, you know, anywhere that live music is performed is a good place to go and beg, you know. Most people, like I said, will not look for volunteers. They'll just work. And so it doesn't hurt to be, you know, pushy and ask people for if you need help. Or don't even ask, just start doing things, you know, and be like, here I am, I'm doing this, and you'll be surprised how many people go, wow, thanks. I didn't know I needed your help, but now that you did, like, amazing, cool. So don't be afraid to push into someone's world and say, I'm here to help. Don't worry about the money, because they don't have any.
That's pretty true. So just last question, do you have any like final comments for those looking to grow their live sound career?
You know, kind of what we've been talking about for this last couple of questions. You know, the whole way to get good at it is to take it serious, and you know, nothing's easy in this business, and there's no handouts. There's no, you know, there's never anybody going, oh, you want to do this? You know, you have to beg people to get into this business, and you have to be really driven, and you have to be knowledgeable. Like, if you get put into a scenario and you're not capable of dealing with that scenario, then guess what? There's your one wasted shot, you know? So if you get that one shot, then be ready for it and have the skill set and have the, you know, the idea of, even if, you know, because live sound and, you know, music making in general is very broad the way it's done. You know, you and I could have completely different approaches to miking a kit, but could both get great results. So, you know, it doesn't matter who trained you or how you found out about what you know, but have the knowledge and have the skill set to, when you do get put in these environments, to be good at it and to excel, and people will recognize and will remember you for that. They'll go, yeah, that guy was good, you know. Train yourself. You know, I know you come to class here and you learn this and that, but don't go home and play video games. Go home and learn more about this stuff, and look online and ask your parents, hey mom, there's this course I saw on this one page, it's $50. Can I get $50 to like watch this one course? Because the free stuff, you have to be really careful with the free stuff, because who knows who's producing it? You know, a lot of the stuff on YouTube, people are just trying to get views for ad money, you know? So who cares? They don't really even care if the content's relevant to what you need to know. So don't be afraid to spend money on, you know, sure, your parents might be spending money for a course at a campus, at college, whatever, to learn, but don't be afraid to find other sources of the knowledge. And you know, I've been doing it 30 years and I still do it all the time. You know, I just paid for an online thing not too long ago. So don't be afraid to look at all times and find the environments where, you know, these things exist. Go to your local sound companies and go, hey, can I come sit at your console and, you know, work on stuff and try to figure stuff out? And they'll say no, and don't let that, you know, scare you. Ask again. Go beg and show up and go, hey, can I sweep the floor so I can get an hour on this thing? And just do what it takes, you know, because it's not easy, and most people don't want people that are like learning around, you know. They just get out of the way. We need professionals, but the only way to get professional is to gain the knowledge. So you got to get it somewhere. If it takes begging and or doing other things, you know, cleaning a bathroom so you can hang out at a sound company for an afternoon, then do that. You know, don't be afraid to do what it takes, because that's what it takes. Doing anything. So
cool. So thank you so much for giving us this interview. And
awesome.
I think we're really excited to hear you talk about the masterclass later.
Awesome. Yeah. Should have a good time.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you.